Have you ever run into someone accidentally as you rounded a corner of a building? Why? Look at these people in the image on your screen. Why do you think they ran into each other? What do you think could have helped them avoid running into each other? What would have helped them avoid the collision? How could you have known, or how could he have known, someone was there before he actually saw them? So how would he have known that this woman was coming from this direction? So if you're thinking, well, maybe she could have been talking on her phone. Maybe she could have been whistling. She's wearing high heels. If she had been stomping loudly, then he would have known. So that would have been a situation in which he would have known that she was coming without seeing them first. So if he had heard her, he would have known. If it's sunny outside like it is in this picture, maybe he could have paid attention to the shadows, and he would have seen the shadow before he saw her. The shadow hints at her presence before she even arrives in front of him. He sees the shadow before he sees the person. Do you see where I'm going with this? So it's foreshadowing. So it's literally seeing the shadow before you see the person, or in literature, in movies, and other such media, the author or the filmmaker or whomever will drop hints to let the reader know, or kind of allow the reader to predict what's going to happen later. So that's the essence of foreshadowing. It is when the author gives you hints as to what will happen in the future. So we'll look at some examples together. I'm actually going to open the reading that you guys will be doing this week, and I'll identify one instance of foreshadowing, and then it's going to be up to you to do the same thing and come up with 5 new examples. Before we get into that, think of a few more examples. So, if a gun was found under a mattress in a story very early on, this could foreshadow violence later in the story. So, if you think about the video earlier in this week, there was the gun in the drawer. It's a similar concept. So, that gun probably means violence. Foreshadowing is useful because it can build suspense. It can also make stories more believable by making us, the reader, more prepared for that ending or for the climax, for the action that will come. If you see a gun, you will expect violence. If you see a shadow, you might expect a person. If you see a creepy dude standing in the background while there are kids playing on a playground, you might think that that guy's up to no good and expect him to do something, so you're more prepared for that action. Let's go ahead and dive into our story for this week. It's right here. It's called The Landlady. So your job this week is going to be to use this note catcher on Google Drive. You're going to fill it out and turn it in as an assignment. So here on the left-hand side, you're going to list the situation in general, just describe it. Here, you're going to directly state what the hint is, what you think it is, and here, what you think is being foreshadowed. So just this is making a prediction, making an inference. So we can even put that, prediction slash inference. An inference is basically a prediction, but it's making a prediction based on evidence. So this will be your evidence. So we're reading The Landlady by Roald Dahl. You can look at the title and kind of think about what that might tell you as far as the action. So even the title can foreshadow. So I'm assuming the landlady is a big part of this story, whoever she is. So I'm just going to read it aloud until I get to my first example of foreshadowing here. Billy Weaver had traveled down from London on the slow afternoon train, with a change at Swindon on the way, and by the time he got to Bath it was about 9 o'clock in the evening, and the moon was coming up out of a clear starry sky over the houses opposite the station entrance. But the air was deadly cold, and the wind was like a flat blade of ice on his cheeks. "Excuse me," he said, "but is there a fairly cheap hotel not too far away from here?" "Try the Bell and the Dragon," the porter answered, pointing down the road. "They might take you in. It's about a quarter of a mile along on the other side." Billy thanked him and picked up his suitcase and set out to walk the quarter-mile to the Bell and the Dragon. He had never been to Bath before. I'm going to stop here because this is actually an example of foreshadowing. He had never been to Bath before. He didn't know anyone who lived there. So the situation is Billy is unfamiliar with the town of Bath and knows no one. So the hint is his lack of knowledge might get him in trouble later on. So I'm predicting he will come to some sort of harm or challenge later on. And this later on is going to come up a lot because foreshadowing has to do with what happens later on in the book. So what is the beginning telling you about the end? What are these hints? So I think that's a hint, and I didn't catch it the first time I read it. We're going to keep going though. But Mr. Greenslade at the head office in London had told him it was a splendid city. Find your own lodgings, he had said, and then go along and report to the branch manager as soon as you've got yourself settled. Billy was 17 years old. He was wearing a new navy blue overcoat, a new brown trilby hat, and a new brown suit, and he was feeling fine. He walked briskly down the street. He was trying to do everything briskly these days. Briskness, he had decided, was the one common characteristic of all successful businessmen. The big shots up at head office were absolutely fantastically brisk all the time. They were amazing. Okay, so that's the main example of foreshadowing that I've seen so far. So the situation is Billy thinks that briskness, which is it means speed, haste, quickness with doing things. So getting things done quickly. It's important to know the words. So use the define function on actively learn. He thinks that briskness is the most important thing. That's the situation. He's thinking that. The hint that it's given me is that Billy's over-reliance, so he depends on briskness, will also get him into trouble. He might, well, this is my prediction. My prediction is he might make decisions too quickly without thinking of the consequences or the risks. This will not be good for Billy. So if you notice what I'm doing is I'm just finding hints, making predictions based on the hints that I'm seeing so far. If we keep going, I'm going to skip the action a little bit. He decides to stay in a bed and breakfast. That's not the one that was recommended to him on page 1, and he's like compelled. He feels like he has to stay there, and I think his briskness has to do with this, but just it's also another element of foreshadowing. I'm not going to tell you how. You can use this one as your first example on your own, but really look at this paragraph. It'll be in pink in your reading as well. So when all at once his eye was caught and held in the most peculiar manner by the small notice that was there. Okay? Just a few more things about actively learn. Some of you have already been using it and you've been doing a really great job. It tells me if you're using the resources. So when you see the highlighting here, click on it and you'll get my notes. So if you use actively learn for our previous assignment, I think most of you are able to figure this out. But you can always, if you don't know a word, so briskness was the word we had just been looking at. If I highlight it, I can define, and it'll tell me what it means. So it gives me the adjective. It means energetic or quick. So you might have to do a little more research. I might type in briskness. It's not going to give it to me. So I know what it means. You can always look online too, but the define feature will help you immensely as far as kind of quickly reading and understanding things go. So that's our quick lesson on briskness. Or not briskness, on foreshadowing. Thank you.